This ugly, rusty-looking penny might be sitting in a jar somewhere, but one of these worthless steel coins shocked collectors when it sold for over $400,000. Yes, an old, scratched Lincoln wheat penny that most people would ignore could secretly be worth more than a house. That dull grey penny you might have dismissed as damaged or fake could actually be one of the most famous coins in American history, and in the right condition, it can be worth tens of thousands of dollars, even when it looks worn, scratched, or completely unremarkable. Back in 1943, something unusual happened. The United States was deep in World War II, and copper was desperately needed for ammunition and military equipment. So instead of the usual brown copper pennies, the US Mint switched to zinc-coated steel. That's why the 1943 Lincoln wheat penny looks silver instead of copper, and why so many people still mistake it for a dime at first glance. Now here's where things get interesting. Because these coins were made from steel, they don't age like normal pennies. Instead of turning brown, they often become dull, grey, spotted, or even rusty. Many people see that rough, worn surface and assume the coin is worthless. But in reality, even heavily circulated 1943 steel pennies can be worth far more than face value, and certain versions can be worth a small fortune. The first thing you want to look at is the date, 1943. That's your starting point. If the coin is silver in color and clearly shows 1943, you're already holding something special. But don't stop there, because the real value comes from small details most people completely miss. Next, check just below the date. You might see a tiny letter, D or S. If there's no letter, it was minted in Philadelphia. If you see a D, it came from Denver. And if you see an S, it was made in San Francisco. All three versions can carry value, but collectors tend to pay closer attention to condition and rarity within each mint. Now here's a simple test almost anyone can do at home, and it can instantly tell you if your coin is something extraordinary. Grab a magnet. A real 1943 steel penny will stick to a magnet because it's made of steel. If your 1943 penny does not stick to a magnet, stop everything, because that could mean you're holding one of the rarest coins in US history. Those are the famous copper 1943 pennies, and they've sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But even if yours sticks, don't lose interest yet, because steel pennies have their own hidden value. Let's talk about condition, but keep it simple. Even if your coin looks worn, scratched, or slightly corroded, it can still be collectible. Many 1943 steel pennies were heavily used during the war, so finding one in perfect shape is difficult. That's why even average-looking coins can sell for several dollars, sometimes much more depending on demand. But if your coin still has a strong silver shine, minimal rust, and clear details in Lincoln's face and the wheat stalks on the back, you could be looking at a much higher value. Coins with that bright, original zinc coating, especially ones that haven't turned dark or spotted, are the ones collectors chase. Here's another detail that most people overlook. Look closely at the surface of the coin under good lighting. If you see unusual patterns, doubling in the letters, or strange textures, that could indicate a mint error. And mint errors are where things can get really exciting. Even a small error, something most people would think is just damage, can push the value up significantly. For example, some 1943 steel pennies have what collectors call double dies, where the lettering appears slightly doubled. Others may have off-center strikes or irregular shapes. These imperfections might look like flaws, but in the world of coin collecting, they can mean serious money. Now let's talk about rust, because this is where many people make a mistake. Steel pennies are known for rusting over time, especially if they've been exposed to moisture. A rusty coin might look completely ruined, but don't throw it away. While heavy, rust does reduce value. Even corroded examples can still be collectible simply because of their historical importance. And remember, millions of people ignore these coins every day because they don't look like real pennies. That's exactly why they still show up in collections, drawers, and old jars waiting to be rediscovered. Another quick tip: pay attention to color. If your 1943 penny has a bright, almost chrome-like appearance, that's a good sign. If it's dull gray, it's still worth checking. But if it has unusual coloring, like a copper tint or patchy tones, it's worth taking a closer look. Sometimes coins were altered or coated after leaving the mint, but occasionally, unusual color can point to something rare. Now imagine this. You're going through an old box of coins, maybe something passed down from family, and you spot a strange silver penny. It looks worn, maybe even a little ugly. Most people would toss it aside without a second thought. But you remember this moment. You check the date, 1943. You grab a magnet, it sticks. You look closer, and suddenly, what seemed like junk starts to feel like a hidden piece of history. That's the thrill of coin collecting. It's not just about perfect, shiny coins locked away in cases. Sometimes, the real treasures are the ones that look the worst. The scratched, the dirty, the forgotten coins that quietly survive decades. Those are the ones that can surprise you. And the 1943 steel penny is one of the best examples of that. First up, coin. That plain-looking 1952 penny with no mint mark might be the kind of coin most people toss aside without a second thought. But here's the reality. Some of these quiet, overlooked coins have surprised collectors with values far beyond what anyone expected, even when they look worn, dark, or completely ordinary. And the reason is simple. When a coin has no mint mark, it means it was made in Philadelphia, the original US Mint. Now, millions of 1952 pennies were produced there, so at first glance, it doesn't sound rare. But here's what most people miss. After decades of circulation, far fewer of these coins remain today in strong, collectible condition. So the real question isn't just, do you have one? It's what condition is it in, and what details are still hiding on it. Start by looking closely at the date, 1952. Make sure it's clear and not completely worn away. Then check under the date. If there's no D or S, you've confirmed it's a Philadelphia coin. Now slow down and really examine the surface. Even if the coin looks dark brown or dirty, don't let that fool you. Many valuable coins look exactly like that. What matters is the detail that survived years of use. Look at Lincoln's face. Can you still see lines in his hair? Is his eye and jawline still defined? These are small things, but they make a huge difference. Coins with stronger details, what collectors call sharpness, are always more desirable. Now flip the coin over. Focus on the wheat stalks. This is one of the easiest ways to judge condition. If the lines inside the wheat are still visible and not completely smooth, your coin is in better shape than most. That alone can push it into a higher value range. But here's where things get really interesting. Pay attention to the color. Most 1952 pennies you'll find are a deep brown. That's normal. But if your coin has even a slight reddish glow, especially under light, that's a big deal. Coins that still show original red copper color are far more attractive to collectors and can be worth significantly more. And sometimes, that red color hides in small patches, around the letters, near the date, or in protected areas of the design. Now here's something many people completely overlook. Look closely at the lettering, Liberty and In God We Trust. If you notice any unusual thickness, slight doubling, or shadow-like effects, don't ignore it. These small differences can come from the way the coin was struck, and collectors pay attention to that. Another simple trick is to tilt the coin under a light source. As you move it, watch how the surface reflects light. You might notice textures, lines, or even subtle doubling that you couldn't see before. This is exactly how hidden features are discovered. Now imagine this moment. You're going through old change, maybe something saved for years, maybe something you almost threw away. You find a 1952 penny. No mint mark. It looks average, maybe even a bit dull. Most people would move on instantly. But you pause. You look closer. The wheat lines are still there. Lincoln's features are stronger than expected. There's even a hint of red shining through in the right light. Suddenly, that ordinary coin doesn't feel so ordinary anymore. That's the difference between someone who overlooks value and someone who discovers it. Now let's talk about wear. If your coin is heavily scratched or extremely worn, the value will be lower, but not zero. Even circulated wheat pennies are collected because of their history. But if your coin has fewer marks, cleaner surfaces, and stronger detail, the value can rise quickly. And if you ever come across one that looks unusually sharp, with bright color and minimal wear, that's when things can get exciting, because those are the coins collectors compete for. Here's the key idea to remember. The 1952 no mint mark penny isn't about instant rarity, it's about hidden quality. It's about finding the small differences that most people never take the time to notice. Because millions were made, but far fewer survived in collectible condition. Next coin. That old 1953 penny with a tiny D under the date might look like just another worn piece of copper, but coins like this have quietly surprised collectors with values far beyond what most people would ever expect, especially when the right details are hiding in plain sight. Here's what makes this coin more interesting than it first appears. The 1953 Lincoln wheat penny came at a time when America was booming after World War II. These coins were used heavily in everyday life, meaning most of them ended up scratched, worn, and forgotten. So today, finding one, especially from the Denver Mint, with strong detail can instantly put you ahead of the average collector. Start with the basics. Look at the date, 1953. Then check just below it for that small D. That confirms it was minted in Denver. While millions were produced, far fewer remain today in collectible condition, and that's where the opportunity begins. Now don't let the condition fool you. Even if your coin looks dull, brown, or slightly damaged, that doesn't mean it's worthless. In fact, many collectors actively search for these older wheat pennies because of their history and scarcity in higher grades. What matters most is what's still visible on the coin. Take a close look at Abraham Lincoln's portrait. Can you still see detail in his hair? Are the lines around his coat and jaw clear? The sharper these features are, the more desirable your coin becomes. Flip it over and study the wheat stalks on the back. If the lines inside the wheat are still visible and not completely worn flat, that's a strong sign your coin holds better value. Now here's something most people completely miss. Check the color carefully. If your 1953D penny is a deep brown, that's normal for a circulated coin. But if you notice hints of red, especially a reddish glow under good lighting, that's a big deal. Coins that retain their original copper red color are far more attractive to collectors and can be worth significantly more. And here's where things get even more interesting. Look closely at the lettering, Liberty and In God We Trust. If you notice any unusual thickness, slight doubling, or shadow-like effects, don't ignore it. Small variations in the strike can make a coin stand out. While they might look like minor imperfections, collectors often see them as unique features. Another simple trick? Tilt the coin under light. Sometimes, hidden details only appear when the light hits the surface at an angle. You might notice textures, lines, or even slight doubling that you couldn't see before. This is exactly how experienced collectors spot coins that others overlook. Now imagine this. You're going through a handful of old coins, maybe from a jar or something passed down over the years. You come across a 1953 penny with a D. It looks average at first. Maybe a little worn, maybe a little dirty. But instead of ignoring it, you take a closer look. You notice the wheat lines are still strong. Lincoln's face still has definition. There's even a slight reddish tone in certain areas. Suddenly, that coin feels different. It's no longer just spare change. It's a piece of history with potential value. That's how discoveries happen. Now let's talk about wear versus uniqueness. A coin that's heavily scratched or damaged will lose some value, but not always all of it. However, if the coin has unusual features that came from the mint itself, like an off-center strike or subtle doubling, that can actually increase interest. Collectors aren't just looking for perfection. They're looking for coins that tell a story. And the 1953D wheat penny has plenty of story behind it, from post-war America to decades of circulation in everyday pockets. Every mark, every bit of wear, is part of that journey. Here's the key takeaway. Even though this coin was produced in large numbers, the number of well-preserved examples is much smaller today. That's why condition, color, and small details matter so much. A coin that looks ordinary at first glance can quickly become something special when you know what to look for. So don't rush past that 1953D penny. Next coin. That dark brown 1950 penny with a tiny D under the date might look like the most ordinary coin in your collection. But coins just like this have quietly sold for surprising amounts, especially when the right details are hiding beneath that worn, aged surface. Here's why this coin deserves a second look. The 1950D Lincoln wheat penny was produced in Denver, and like many coins of that era, it circulated heavily for decades. That means most examples you'll find today are worn, scratched, and overlooked. And that's exactly why collectors pay attention, because truly nice examples are much harder to find than people think. Start with the basics. Check the date, 1950. Then look just below it for that small D. That confirms it came from the Denver Mint. Now, at first glance, this might not seem rare, but value in coins like this doesn't come from just the year or mint mark. It comes from the details most people ignore. Now slow down and really examine the coin. Look at Lincoln's face. Even if the coin is brown and dull, Can you still see clear lines in his hair? Is his jawline still defined? Are the features sharp or smooth? The more detail that remains, the more collectors become interested. Flip the coin over and study the wheat stalks. This is one of the easiest ways to judge quality. If the wheat lines are still visible and not completely worn flat, that's a strong sign your coin is in better condition than most. Many coins from this era have lost those details completely, so if yours still has them, that's a big plus. Now here's something important that many people miss. The color. A brown coin like this is completely normal after decades of circulation. But don't assume brown means low value. In fact, collectors categorize copper coins by color: brown, red-brown, and red. If your coin shows even a slight reddish tone under light, especially in protected areas around the lettering, that can increase its desirability. Sometimes that original copper shine is still hiding. You just have to look for it. Here's a simple trick. Tilt the coin under bright light and slowly move it. Watch how the surface reacts. You might notice subtle shine, smoother fields, or even small details that weren't obvious at first glance. This is exactly how experienced collectors spot coins that others overlook. Now let's talk about something even more exciting: small variations. Take a close look at the words Liberty and In God We Trust. Do the letters look normal, or do you see slight thickness, shadowing, or doubling? These tiny differences can come from the minting process, and while they might look like imperfections, they can make a coin stand out. Collectors love coins that are just a little bit different. And sometimes, that difference is extremely subtle. Now imagine this. You're going through a handful of old coins, maybe from a drawer, maybe something saved years ago. You come across a 1950 penny. It's dark, worn, nothing flashy. Most people would skip right past it. But you don't. You take a closer look. The wheat lines are still there. Lincoln's features are sharper than expected. There's even a faint hint of original color when the light hits it just right. In that moment, the coin changes. It's no longer just spare change. It's a collectible with potential. That's how hidden value is discovered. Now let's be real about value. A heavily worn 1950 penny might only be worth a small amount above face value. But as condition improves, even slightly, the value can climb. Coins with better detail, cleaner surfaces, and stronger eye appeal are the ones collectors compete for. And if you ever come across one that looks unusually sharp, with minimal wear and strong color, that's when things can get truly exciting, because those are much harder to find today. Here's the key takeaway. Coins like the 1950D aren't about obvious rarity. They're about overlooked potential. They're about finding quality where others see nothing. And because so many of these coins were used and abused over the years, the few that still look decent stand out more than ever. Next coin. That worn, brown 1946 penny with no mint mark might look like the most ordinary coin in your collection. But coins just like this have quietly turned into surprising paydays, especially when the right details are hiding beneath years of use. Here's what most people don't realize. A 1946 penny with no mint mark means it was made in Philadelphia, right after World War II ended. This was a time when America was transitioning back to normal life, and coins like this were used heavily in everyday transactions. Because of that, most surviving examples today are worn down, scratched, and often ignored. And that's exactly where opportunity begins. Start by confirming the basics. Look at the date, 1946. Then check under it. If there's no D or S, you've got a Philadelphia coin. Simple, but important. Now don't let the worn appearance fool you. Even if your coin looks dark brown or a little rough, that doesn't mean it has no value. In fact, many collectors expect coins from this era to look exactly like that. What matters most is how much detail is still left. Take a close look at Lincoln's face. Can you still see lines in his hair? Is his eye and jawline still defined, or have they worn smooth? The sharper these features are, the more desirable the coin becomes. Small details like this can make a bigger difference than most people realize. Now flip the coin over. Focus on the wheat stalks. This is one of the easiest ways to judge condition. If the inner lines of the wheat are still visible, that's a strong sign your coin is in better shape than many others from the same year. If those lines are completely flat, the coin has seen heavy circulation. But here's where things get more interesting. Check the color carefully. Most 1946 pennies are a deep brown. That's completely normal. But if you notice any hint of red or reddish-brown under good lighting, that's a big plus. Coins that retain even a portion of their original copper color are more attractive to collectors and can command higher prices. Sometimes that red color hides in small areas, around the date, inside the lettering, or near Lincoln's profile. Now here's something many people overlook completely. Look closely at the words Liberty and In God We Trust. Do the letters look clean, or do you notice slight doubling, thickness, or shadowing? These small differences can come from the minting process, and while subtle, they can make your coin more interesting to collectors. Another simple trick? Tilt the coin under a light. As you move it, watch how the surface reacts. You might notice textures, smoother areas, or even tiny details that weren't visible before. This is exactly how hidden value is discovered, by looking just a little closer than everyone else. Now imagine this. You're sorting through old coins, maybe something saved for years, maybe something you almost ignored. You find a 1946 penny. No mint mark. It looks average, maybe even a bit worn. Most people would move on instantly. But you stop. You look closer. The wheat lines are still there. Lincoln's features haven't completely faded. There's even a slight glow of original copper when the light hits it just right. Suddenly, that ordinary coin feels different. That's the moment collectors live for. Now let's talk about wear versus value. If your coin is heavily scratched or extremely worn, the value will be lower, but not zero. Wheat pennies are widely collected, and even circulated examples are kept for their history. But if your coin has fewer marks, stronger details, and better overall appearance, the value can rise quickly. And if you ever come across one that looks unusually sharp, with clean surfaces and strong color, that's when things can get exciting, because those are much harder to find today